share my screen. Oops. So we have started a new module today. So when you click on modules on our homepage, it should take you to the Unit 1 module. If it does not take you to the Unit 1 module, then you'll need to scroll down a bit to get to Unit 1. But we've started a new module. Okay, I'll make sure I go back and change it. Thank you for letting me know, Ashley. We started a new module, so there is a new warm-up, Unit 1, Day 1. We've got 6 minutes to go ahead and knock that out. That should be plenty of time, 4 questions, and I'll let you all get to it. As you take this warm-up, please start thinking about making some connections between Sternger, the scientific method, and other things that we talked about last week.
Mr. Rudd, I made the Google folder. I just don't know how to submit it because it's not allowing me
to. There should be an option to, so there should be like a drop down arrow next to the name of your folder. Do you see that?
Give me a sec. The arrow?
Yes, it should be a drop down arrow.
Yeah, it opens the folder instead of actually like wanting me to submit it.
So, okay, there's got to be a share option somewhere. Can you right click on it or control click?
I don't have a mouse, but
Oh, you're doing this from your phone?
no, I'm using the touchpad, and when I do that, it just opens it. Like,
okay. On a Chromebook, I think there's like there should be a control button or an alt button. Actually, you can share your screen and we can try to figure it out. I'll stop presenting for a minute.
am I presenting?
Yes.
Okay. So like, biology.
Oh, okay. So actually, this you don't need to submit it here, but if you go back to your Google folder, like go into your drive. And then from there, if you right click on the folder on your honors biology folder or control click or whatever. Yeah, do you see share? Yep, at the top.
I think I already shared it to you though.
Okay, well then that's fine. If you've already, let me check and see.
Yeah, I did. That's your email, right?
Yes, that's me. And Okay, you shared it, but I just don't. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, so it's not late?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Abiotic means living things, right?
Abiotic means non-living. All right, folks. So hopefully that was enough time to get through that warm up. Again, the warm ups are there to help you all to start making connections between things that we've talked about in previous lessons, and it also gives you an opportunity to start thinking about, as a preview, what we'll talk about in that day's lesson. So today we're going to introduce a new concept. We're also starting our content today. So we just finished Unit 0, that Unit 0 module. That was really an introduction to biology to get you all acclimated to the procedures of the course and the way that we like to do things in biology. Now we're actually going to start the real work of preparing for the EOC exam. And from this point forward, we're really approaching this goal. We're pursuing this goal of mastery. And I'm sure you all have heard other teachers talk about mastery, so I will not bloviate, but mastery really in biology means getting an 80% or above on everything that you do, everything that you submit in this class. You're going for that goal of an 80%. And if you can pursue that goal of an 80%, that speaks to the fact that you've mastered the content. You have a strong grasp on that content. You can use the information that you've learned from those objectives and build upon that information. You can ask questions of the information and interrogate the information. So we want all of our students to be there. And I'm particularly confident in this class because for the last 6 days, you all have been really, really engaged in the material. You all have asked questions, you've contributed, and I've seen it not just from one or two students, but from the majority of students in the class. Everyone at this point almost has contributed something. So we need to keep that momentum. We need to work together as a team. I will be here as the facilitator of information. I'm not the arbiter of information. I don't know everything. You all will hopefully teach me things. And when I say something that's wrong, perhaps you all will correct me, and I'll make sure that we get that information accurate and precise. Okay, but the goal starts today. It starts now. I want you guys on your A games. I want you all taking strong notes, and I want you all asking questions when necessary. On the point of strong note taking, we've talked about this before, but I don't necessarily care about the medium that you choose to take notes on. For example, you could choose your notes app on your phone. You could choose Google Docs. You could choose pen and paper, which I think is a solid and perhaps the best choice. But whatever the medium you choose is, we should be taking efficient and effective notes. And we talked about that, but that means being able to pull out the most useful and important information, capturing that information in a useful way. So I'm a proponent of visualization. What that means is that maybe you decide that what's best for you is writing things in outline format and then going back and highlighting. Maybe you decide what's best for you is going back and creating a mind map of the information in which you're connecting cross-cutting concepts with arrows and by circling things and boxing other things. Whatever is best for you, have some type of visual representation. That way, and research has shown, when students are taking tests, what you're doing is scanning your brain for previous mental images. And if you've seen it in your notes in the same way and in the same places, and if you know, I always highlight important terms in pink, or I always circle new definitions and I underline concepts that have come up in previous lessons. If you can get in the habit of doing that, you will start to have those mental images that come up in your head as you're taking the test, and that's extremely useful to you because no longer are you kind of starting from scratch when you start an exam. You've already got these mental cues in your head that you can call upon. So visualization works really well. Some people like to doodle. Some people like to, when I show a diagram on the screen, they like to copy that diagram in their notes really quickly. Whatever works for you is what I'd like to see you do in order to take the most efficient and effective notes. Another thing to note is that when you miss a day, or if your internet goes out or your Chromebook dies, that information is not just gone forever. Okay, we have ways of recording, and I always record the lesson. And the lesson is typically going to be on YouTube within 24 hours. So you all can go in if you've missed a part of the lesson and you can see exactly what we talked about and go back and get those notes. We will also make notes available to you all on Canvas as well. Okay. And then lastly, the best students don't just write their notes and then just set them aside for perpetuity. Just leave them over there forever and never do anything with them. You've got to return to your notes in order to really synthesize the information. Now, when I was a student, this was something that was difficult for me because you put so much time into taking the notes, and then you've got to do that on a daily basis. Every time you've got class, you're taking more and more notes. It's difficult because you feel like you're throwing more and more information to actually go back and look at the things that you've previously taken notes about. But what you should learn and get in the habit of doing now while you're still in high school and the stakes are relatively low is that it's possible to take notes and then find time throughout the day or throughout the next day's lesson to recover those notes and to go over them. And you go back and, during the warm-up, you do the warm-up in 4 minutes, but you've got 6 total minutes. Well, now you've got 2 minutes to go back and look at yesterday's notes. Or, Mr. Rudd is helping an individual student and this information doesn't necessarily pertain to me. That's time that I can use to go back and flip through yesterday's notes. All right, so there's time built into the class, and I don't want to necessarily call it downtime because it's not that I want you all to just be idle during that time, but it is time that you can use to work on things individually and go back and look through your notes. So the best students are going back and they're looking at their notes a little bit every day. And that's going to help you to start to memorize things and make some connections between things, and also to improve your notes because just like an essay, good notes are only the first draft. Okay, so when you're writing a strong essay, you might write it all out at once in an hour, hour and a half. But that's absolutely not the final version that you're going to eventually submit. You're going to go back and you're going to edit it. You might ask someone else to edit it for you. You might read it out loud to see how it flows. And you're going to make changes as you do these things. Your notes should be the same way. Now, it's not as formal, obviously, but you do want to give yourself an opportunity to say, oh, I actually learned a little bit more about that a couple days after I took this note. Let me just add on. Or actually, Mr. Rudd went back and corrected himself. He said that was a mistake. He shouldn't have explained it like that. Let me cross that out and rewrite it. Okay, so notes are a working document. They are a living document. You're going back and you're editing them as you go. And that's what's really going to separate the good students from the excellent students. All right, so today's lesson is about biological molecules. Today is obviously January 12th, 2021. We're moving fast already. And it is the first day of Unit 1. So this is an important day because we're introducing some very, very salient content that you all will need to rely upon for the rest of the semester. And that sounds dramatic, but I'm not kidding. Today's lesson, I can guarantee you what you learned today is going to be on the ELC exam. And as always, we like to start the lesson with an objective as well as an essential question, just to give ourselves some direction and a goal that we're hoping to achieve. So the objective is to identify 4 major classes of biological molecules. And the essential question, what makes a biological compound and why are they important? So you see 2 terms there, the biological molecules and biological compound. I'm going to use those interchangeably, and we're also going to throw in some other terms, but we're referring to the same 4 things, and that's what we're going to talk about today. What I like for you all to do is definitely make sure you write down the title of the lesson, as well as the date. This just gives you something that you can come back to, and it helps you to be more organized in your note taking. So I'll leave this up for 10 more seconds. Three, two, one. All right, so these biological molecules, I'm sure you all have heard of them. Some of you probably have some prior knowledge that you'd like to share with us as well, and I welcome that. Anytime something comes up and you're like, oh, I know what that is, or oh, Mr. Rudd, have you heard of this? Feel free to type it in the chat or raise your hand. Yes, Santuan, we are taking notes starting now. But these biological molecules are omnipresent. That means that they're present everywhere in all life forms. You will find these biological molecules in all life forms. So it's not just plants, it's not just animals, it's not just bacteria, it's not what we'll learn to call prokaryotes. All living things have these same 4 biological molecules. Now they come up in different forms, but you'll see these same 4 classes of biomolecules. No, I'm not asking you to turn your notes in. That won't be necessary. But thank you for the question. And Ashley, your attendance is now fixed. Okay. So these molecules allow organisms to complete the 8 essential life processes that we talked about yesterday. Does anybody remember the acronym that we introduced yesterday to remember these 8 essential life processes?
Was it I know I say it properly, but it was Stringer.
Good, thank you, Lisa. And I see Carolyn has got it in the chat as well. So for those of us who don't remember it, and I see Dejan typed it as well, so I appreciate the 3 of you. That's 100% correct. We've got this acronym of Sternger or Sternger, however you want to say it, it's fine with me, as long as you remember what those 8 terms are. And we're going to see those 8 terms on the next slide. But does anybody think that they remember those 8 terms? Or just give me 1 or 2.
I know one is synthesis.
It was synthesis, transport, excretion.
Good. That's those are the first three.
So the next one, regulation.
Good.
Nutrition,
Nutrition.
growth and development, and respiration.
Yeah, but we got one more.
Reproduction.
Reproduction. Excellent. So seems like a lot of us remember that acronym. That's excellent. We're going to keep coming back to that. That's going to be kind of a guiding light for us this semester. So I'm really proud of you guys for remembering that acronym and remembering what some of those terms are. For those of us who don't remember or who weren't here yesterday, you'll see them on the next slide, and I'm going to encourage you to take a screenshot or a picture of it when you see it. But we need these 4 biological molecules to complete those 8 essential life processes. They are absolutely essential. And the way we get these essential biological molecules is by eating or by ingesting them. And in some cases, we will break them down once we eat them and then repurpose them, turn them into other things or turn them into each other. We might eat a carb, break it down and turn it into a nucleic acid. We might eat lipids, break it down and turn them into proteins. Okay, and this is the process of synthesis. Synthesis, of course, means to take smaller things and build them into larger things. Often you have to first break things down into small versions of themselves, and then you then you synthesize them into bigger things. Again, keep in mind, you don't need to write everything down on every slide. Get in the habit of and practice picking out the important information. All right, so here's Sturgeon. I asked people yesterday to take a picture or take a screenshot, whatever works for you. But here are those terms that we just heard from Dijon and JT, and I think Carolyn came in and gave us a few, and Melissa and Sally. So we had a lot of people, Janelle, I think, as well. We've got some good examples there also. So this is probably one of the best, what am I saying? Probably some of the best opportunities for a nice mind map. If you wanted to draw out each letter of Sturgeon and then start making some connections between them and add on as we learn about some of these concepts. We're going to talk about photosynthesis. We're going to talk about hormones. We're going to talk about homeostasis again later in the class. We're going to talk about development of a fetus. So you can continue to add on as we learn more. All right. So here's a little bit of chemistry. Typically, the first unit of biology does include some chemistry concepts, and we'll talk about one today. So most of you know what elements are. You've seen that big periodic table of elements that has 120 of them, and they're organized in very specific ways and in columns and rows. Two of the most important elements to life and two of the most common elements that we see in all life forms are carbon and hydrogen. And all of the 4 biological molecules that we will introduce today have carbon-hydrogen bonds that hold their atoms together. So here we've got a gray carbon atom. Now, keep in mind, these things are extremely small. In reality, the carbon atom is bigger than the hydrogen atom. Here they appear to be the same size, but the carbon atom is significantly larger than the hydrogen atom. But we've got a gray carbon atom and 2 red hydrogen atoms. They're connected by what are called bonds. In this case, we call them carbon-hydrogen bonds. There are many, many different types of bonds and many different types of bonds that appear in biological molecules. But for the purposes of this class, we've got to know about carbon-hydrogen bonds. If you're interested in the other types of bonds that exist, take AP Bio, take chemistry, and you'll learn a little bit more. Okay. So when atoms are bonded together, they form molecules. So a single atom, not super helpful. You won't often see a single, most elements don't even exist in singular forms. You know, they have to be bonded to something else because otherwise they're so reactive that they just simply can't exist by themselves. So almost always you'll see atoms bonded together. And when you bond singular atoms together and you create something larger, that larger thing is called a molecule. So what we're doing here is zooming out. We're backing up from the level of organization. We start off really, really small, almost too small to even conceive of. An atom is unbelievably small. Keep in mind that if I take 602 septillion molecules of water, it still only weighs 18 grams. So that's a 6 followed by a 0 followed by a 2 followed by 23 zeros. So 602 septillion molecules of atom still only weighs 18 grams. That's, you know, 18, if you were to drink 18 grams, you'd be like, what was the point? I'm still extremely thirsty. So that puts into perspective just how small these atoms are, where 602 septillion molecules of H2O still only weighs 18 grams. And that puts into perspective just how many atoms make up the human body. All right, so let's continue to zoom out and then we'll start to see some connections between those really, really small atoms and an actual organism like the human body. So an atom, a group of atoms is called a molecule. A group of molecules is going to be called a macromolecule. Go figure, the prefix macro means large or big. So a macromolecule is a group of molecules. And we're going to talk about the 4 macromolecules today. So in this case, this looks to be, let's just call this a hydrogen atom. Let's call this molecule H2O. We've got 2 of those white hydrogen atoms and 1 red oxygen atom. So H2O, that's water. When we take several of these and combine them with other molecules as well, we create a larger macromolecule. Let's call this macromolecule a carbohydrate, which we'll learn much more about starting today. When we take a carbohydrate and we combine a carbohydrate with a lipid and we combine those lipids and carbohydrates with nucleic acid, we might end up creating an organelle. This organelle is called mitochondria. I'm sure you've heard of that before. We'll talk more about that in the next unit. So a group of macromolecules is called an organelle. A group or a community of organelles is called a cell. So the cell is made up of several different types of organelles. You're going to have a cellular membrane that houses all of the other organelles. And inside of that cellular membrane, you're going to have mitochondria. You'll have a nucleus. You might have a vacuole. You might have chloroplast. You're going to have ribosomes. And we'll talk about all of these in the next unit. You all will know them you'll know them by memory quite easily in the next few weeks. Okay, so this specific type of cell is called an epithelial cell. The epithelial cells are the outer layers of our organs. So our skin is made up of epithelial cells because our skin is really just an organ. The cells that line our intestines are made up of epithelial cells. Even the cells that surround our heart have some. There are some epithelial cells there. All right. So when we take a group, when we group cells together, we can create tissues. When we combine different types of cells, we can create tissues. This appears to be some type of tissue that is in the stomach lining. We talked about it already, but the stomach is a very acidic environment. It's got a lot of acids inside of it. If those acids were to always be in contact with the stomach wall itself, that would be very dangerous. You'd start to end up developing actual burns or abscesses in your stomach. And this does happen to some people. So we've got to have this protective layer of epithelial cells that secrete mucus that can protect the stomach from being burned by its own acids. So here's an image of the stomach. When we combine several different types of tissue, we create an organ. When we combine several organs, we create an organ system. So this is the digestive system. You can see the organs that make up the digestive system. They're not quite showing the esophagus here, but typically the mouth and the esophagus are an important part of the digestive system as well. The esophagus leads into the stomach. We can also see the liver here, and we can see the gallbladder. We can see the pancreas a little bit back there. We can see the large intestines, and we can see the small intestines. We can see the appendix right here as well. So these are organs of the human digestive system, and each of them plays a role. They each have a role to play in the functioning of our digestion. Your stomach obviously helps to break down things chemically as well as physically. If you've ever heard your stomach growl, that's actually food moving through your stomach and into your small intestines and large intestines. You've got muscles that surround these organs that kind of in waves push food through, that you don't even have to think about this process. Your body, your brain tells them to do it automatically. The gallbladder is going to secrete bile, and that bile is going to help break down the food even more and help separate the good stuff from the bad stuff. A lot of digestion actually takes place in your intestines, in your small intestines. The water intake takes place often in your small intestines. Okay, so the bladder would also be a part of the urinary system, is closely related to this system as well. If you want to learn more about that, you can take anatomy. But of course, when we combine several organ systems, we end up creating an organism. So even in what I was just talking about, we heard about different organ systems playing a role. The nervous system, meaning the brain and the spinal cord, are responsible for sending those messages that tell your muscles to move the food down and throughout your small intestines. The urinary system is going to take water from your small intestines and place it into your bladder so it can be removed. Your circulatory system is going to surround these intestines with blood vessels so that when things are being digested, the good stuff can be taken out and delivered to the rest of your body. So all of these systems are constantly, interacting with one another to create an organism. So we start off with something that's really small, but everything has a role to play. Even something as small as an atom has an important role to play. A group of atoms is called a molecule. A group of molecules creates a macromolecule. A group of macromolecules creates an organelle. A group of organelles in the right proportion creates a cell, so on and so forth. So these are our levels of organization. Any questions about that? Of course, we're exemplifying synthesis here. We're taking smaller things and we're creating larger things. Okay. All right. Now here are those 4 major classes of biomolecules. So this is a huge bang for your buck slide. if you're kind of zoning out and you're in your thoughts right now, I need you to snap back into it. This is the slide that you need to pay attention to. We've got to memorize these 4 major biomolecules. They are carbohydrates, which I'm fine referring to as carbs. They are lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. You will also hear me refer to these biological molecules with those other terms as well: organic molecules, polymers, macromolecules. We're talking about these same 4 things. So don't be confused by that. We're talking about those same 4 things. And these same 4 things appear in all life forms. They appear in different proportions in different places, but even within the cell, even within one singular cell, you're going to see each of these 4 things. You'll see carbohydrates because carbohydrates are needed to create energy. You'll see lipids because the cell membrane, which is the external layer of the cell, is made up of lipids. You'll see proteins because proteins are everywhere. Almost everything is made up of proteins. And the primary goal of most cells is to make some type of protein. We'll talk more about that. And you'll see nucleic acids because every cell has its own DNA. It has DNA inside of a nucleus, and nucleic acids are, an example of a nucleic acid is DNA. In fact, the Na in nucleic acid or in DNA stands for nucleic acid. So that was a quick overview. We're going to talk about each of them individually over the next few days. Each of those 4 is a macromolecule. And a macromolecule is made up of long chains that we call polymers. This prefix poly, P-O-L-Y, means many. M-A-N-Y, many. Not miniature, but many as in there are a lot of them. So a polymer is a larger molecule that's made up of many monomers that are linked together. That's why we call them a chain. So you'll hear me refer to monomers as the subunits or the building blocks. They're like Lego bricks, Lego pieces. One Lego brick by itself is not super impressive. You can kind of like toss it around in your hand or whatever, but you can't do too much with it. But when you start to combine a few Lego pieces, okay, now you've got different combinations that you can put them in to create different shapes and start doing different things with. If you've got hundreds of Lego pieces, now the possibilities are virtually endless. You can create any number of structures to do any number of things. And that's what these macromolecules are. They're combinations of many hundreds of smaller subunits or smaller monomers. And just like Lego pieces, the shape matters. So I can have the same 5 Lego pieces, but if I combine them in different ways, I end up with different shapes. And when it's shaped differently, it ends up with a different job. If I'm trying to create a Lego combination, and that this is, I recognize, I'm assuming that you all know what Legos are, but some of you might not, so I apologize if you don't. But if I'm trying to create a Lego work of art that rolls like a tire, then I need to give it a certain shape. If I'm trying to create the tallest possible Lego piece, then I need to give that a certain shape. So the job depends on the shape. The function depends on the shape. And that's going to be another theme in this course. So the monomers are the individual Lego pieces, the individual building blocks, the individual subunits. And the polymers are the macromolecules themselves. They are the carbs, they are the lipids, the nucleic acids, or the proteins. Each one of those macromolecules has their own monomer, and we can see that pretty well in the image in the bottom right. So if we're thinking about nucleic acids are made up of monomers called nucleotides. Carbs are made up of monomers called monosaccharides. Lipids are made up of glycerol and fatty acids, and proteins are made up of amino acids. And we'll talk about that again a lot over the next few days. All right, so we are basically at the asynchronous time. So this is supposed to link to a video, but I'm not going to watch that right now. I want to ask you all what you think. So why do we say that you are what you eat? Now I'll leave this up on the screen for a minute so you can read. It says every 35 days, your skin replaces itself and your body makes new cells from the food you eat. What you eat literally becomes you. So what does it mean when we say you are what you eat? I'll accept answers in the chat or out loud.
What's the kind? They say that because when when you eat junk food, they think that you're unhealthy, but then when you eat like salads or or other stuff like healthy, they say that you're fit.
Good, yeah. So sometimes it is a matter of perception. You know, when people see you eating poorly, then they say, oh, well, you must be unhealthy. And when they see you eating well, then they say, oh, you must be a fit person. And that's true. But scientifically, it's also true as well, because the foods that you eat are literally going to be broken down and then used to make new cells that will become you, right? So the cells that are your skin right now have not been those same cells since you were a baby. Those cells died 15, 16 years ago, however old you are. You know, cells don't last long. Most cells don't have a long lifespan unless we're talking about the cells that are in our brain and in our spinal cord. Those are different. But most of the cells that make you who you are have a pretty short lifespan, maybe a few months at most. And eventually they'll die and they need to be replaced. And the way that our bodies replace them is by using all those nutrients, and as JT said in the chat, vitamins and proteins that we've taken in from our food. If you have taken in a lot of bad things, you've got a lot of sugar and a lot of unnecessary fats, then your body can't really do anything with those. And so you start to store them in uncomfortable and in weird places. Not weird, but in places.
That's why all y'all guys got double chins.
Not everybody has double chin, but we do know that, you know, sometimes fats get stored in places where we don't want them to be stored. And fats are not meant to be stored, really. We want to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Let's see what study says. I read something about like the skin replaces itself every 4 years, so wasn't touched with the same. That's true. And this actually says that it's 35 days. Now, I don't know the exact number. There's a big difference between 4 years and 35 days, but your skin does replace itself. And this is why over time, even scars and even tattoos will begin to fade, because the skin is, the skin is replacing itself. Okay, good. All right, let's see if we can get a couple of these questions answered. So why is it so difficult to tell what makes us healthy or unhealthy? I'm not sure what, let's see, let's pick another one. What aspects of your health are you responsible for, and what are you not responsible for? I like that one. What do you guys think about this second question? What aspects of your health are you responsible for, and what are you not responsible for?
You're responsible for what goes into your body, but you're not responsible for like the growth of your body.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Does anyone agree with that or want to add on or disagree?
Anything you're like born with, you're not really responsible of if it like messes up your health.
Okay.
Like certain disorders.
Yeah, so this is going to be a big topic that we talk about later in the course, but obviously genetics are a part of our health and we're born with some things, as Dejan said. So I don't know that we would consider ourselves responsible for that. Some things, sometimes it's literally just random in terms of the conditions that we're born with. We are responsible for what we eat, but we're not responsible for how our bodies react to it. Okay, Michelle. So I like that. That does kind of marry those two concepts from Lisa and Dejan. So Lisa said that we're responsible for what we eat, and then Dejan said that sometimes our genetics control how our bodies respond to things. And you said you kind of combine those. JT, allergies are something we aren't responsible for. True. That's true as well. So I think you could probably make an argument that in some cases we're not responsible for what we eat. Some of you probably are not employed and cannot afford to buy your own food. So you are in some ways forced to eat what's provided to you. So I don't know that we would say you're responsible for that. Maybe you'd prefer to eat differently than what you are provided on a daily basis. And in some cases, let's say you might not have access to a certain type of food. So in the United States, that's difficult for many of us to imagine, but there are even here in our country, food deserts where people don't have access to the most nutritious foods. The west side of Charlotte is, by some accounts, considered a food desert, meaning that people would have to travel more than a mile from their home to access fresh produce. So that's a concept that we might say people aren't actually in control. They're not responsible for what they can and cannot eat because they simply don't have access to it. They can't afford it, or they have to travel a long way to get it. And in other countries, that's a common concept, right? We can imagine in some sub-Saharan African countries and in some Southeast Asian countries that people just don't have access to clean water, or people don't have access to certain types of meat. Maybe your religion prevents you from eating certain things. So we wouldn't say that you're responsible for that. You can make an argument for being responsible for a lot and not being responsible for a lot. It just depends on how you see things. That was a good question. Thank you for contributing. We've got 28, no, not that long, 26 minutes left. And we've got two things that I want you guys to go ahead and knock out. Two assignments under the Unit 1 module. They're both pretty easy. You might start with the Amoeba Sisters practice because that has an actual video, which is linked here. It's also embedded in Canvas, so you can watch it there on your own. And then you can answer the questions as you go. I think you'll be able to get that done in 15 minutes. And then there's one other assignment that's only 5 questions long that I think and they're multiple choice questions. So you should be able to get that done in probably 5 minutes. So we've got enough time to get both assignments done today. And I will leave you all to it. I'll be here on mute to answer any questions you might have. Okay, folks, it's now 1:20. So if you need any question?
Have a nice day.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And if you need any help with any of the assignments from today, please let me know. Of course, we have until the end of this unit, which will be January 22nd, next Friday, to complete these assignments. So let me know if you need any help, and I will talk to you all tomorrow. Have a great Tuesday.
All right, have a good Tuesday.
Thank you.